Faith that waits, 5 reasons to trust God. When you don't understand. Introduction. When faith meets silence. There are moments in life when heaven seems quiet. When your prayers rise like smoke, but return without an echo. When every door you knock on stays closed. And when the path ahead disappears into the fog of uncertainty. You've done everything right. You've prayed, believed, waited. And yet, nothing changes. The silence of God can feel heavier than any storm. It's not just the absence of sound. It's the ache of not understanding why. We like to believe that faith means victory, that trust will always lead to open doors, quick answers, and visible miracles. But true faith is often born in the shadows, in the stillness, where no sign appears, and no whisper is heard. It is in those moments that faith stops being a feeling and becomes a choice, a quiet, trembling, yet resolute choice. I will still trust you, even when I don't understand. Waiting is one of the hardest parts of the spiritual journey. It tests not just our patience, but our understanding of who God is. We live in a world that moves fast, where instant messages, instant results, and instant validation shape our expectations. But God's kingdom does not move at the speed of Wi-Fi. It moves at the rhythm of eternity. He is never in a hurry, yet he is never late. His timing does not bow to our clocks, because his purpose is not measured in minutes, it's measured in transformation. Sometimes the waiting season feels like being suspended between faith and fear, where your heart says, trust, but your mind whispers, what if? The prayers you once spoke with confidence now come out with tears. You start to wonder if God forgot your address, or if you somehow prayed the wrong way. Yet, in the stillness, in the space between the question and the answer, something sacred is taking shape. Because God's silence is not his absence. His delay is not his denial. Every second that passes in waiting is pregnant with divine purpose, shaping your heart, stretching your faith, teaching you to see beyond the visible. What feels like nothing is often the quiet architecture of something eternal being built in you. When you can't trace his hand, you're invited to trust his heart. When you can't see what he's doing, you're asked to believe that he's doing something far greater than you could imagine. Sometimes the miracle isn't the answer you're waiting for. It's the strength that grows while you wait. Think of Abraham, waiting decades for a promise to be fulfilled. Of Joseph, forgotten in a prison cell before being raised to a palace. Of Hannah, praying through tears before holding the child she longed for. Every story of faith has a chapter called waiting. And yet, in every waiting, God was working. In ways no one could see, but everyone would one day understand. Maybe you're in that chapter now. Maybe you've prayed for healing that hasn't come. For restoration that seems impossible. For direction that feels unclear. And perhaps, deep down, you're wondering if you've been left behind. But the truth is, you are not forgotten. The author is still writing, even when the page seems blank. There is beauty in the pause. There is purpose in the silence. Waiting is not the absence of movement. It is the sacred ground where trust takes root. Because while you wait, God is weaving threads of grace through the unseen corners of your story, connecting people, moments, and miracles in ways that will only make sense later. So if today you find yourself in a season of waiting, take heart. You are standing in holy ground. The space where faith learns to breathe without evidence and where trust matures into love. God may seem silent, but he is never still. He is preparing you, shaping you, strengthening you for the very thing he's preparing for you. And when the time comes when heaven's silence breaks and light floods the horizon, you look back and realize the waiting was not wasted. It was where your faith became real. Your character deepened and your heart learned to rest in the one who holds all things together. This is the sacred beauty of faith that waits. The kind of faith that holds on in the dark, that believes without proof, and that trusts the heart of God even when the path is hidden. Because sometimes the most powerful miracle is not what happens after you wait, but who you become while you wait. Part 1. Because God's timing is perfect. There are days when it feels like God is late, when prayers go unanswered, when dreams seem delayed, and when your heart grows weary in the long silence. You begin to wonder, Lord, do you still hear me? But in that quiet, in the space that feels forgotten, God is working, quietly, tenderly, perfectly. He is never early. He is never late. He arrives right on time, according to the rhythm of eternity, not the rush of the world. God does not measure time by minutes or months. He measures it by purpose. While we see delay, He sees development. While we see silence, He is preparing something sacred beneath the surface. Sometimes He takes us the long way around, not to waste time, but to prepare our hearts, to make them soft enough, deep enough, and strong enough to receive what He intends to give. If He answered too soon, we might not be ready to hold the blessing. If He waited too long, we might lose heart. But God knows the exact moment when we are ready, not only to receive His promise, but to carry it well. Faith is not just trusting that God will do something, it's trusting that He knows when to do it. Like the seasons that turn without fail, God's timing moves with divine precision. Spring never arrives before winter has finished its work. Likewise, the waiting seasons in your life are not punishment, they are preparation. Every quiet day is a lesson in patience. Every slow step is a test of trust. Every pause is a reminder that God's schedule is written in purpose, not pressure. We live in an age that glorifies immediacy, but the kingdom of God grows in stillness. The seeds of miracles are sown in silence. Between the prayer and the answer, God is writing a story, one that will make sense only when viewed through the lens of eternity. Miracles rarely happen in an instant. They are built, layer by layer, in the unseen hours of trust. The waiting is not empty. It is the womb of what will one day be born. Just as a seed buried beneath the soil cannot see the light yet, life is already stirring within it. What looks like stillness is actually God at work in secret. Abraham waited nearly 25 years for a promise that seemed impossible. Joseph was forgotten in a prison before being raised to a palace. Hannah cried through sleepless nights before holding the child she prayed for. And in each story, God was never late. He was weaving purpose into every pause, shaping faith through every delay. And when the moment came, the miracle was more than an answer. It was a testimony. When you learn to trust God's timing, you stop fearing delay, because what arrives on time lasts longer, and what grows slowly grows strong. God's timing is not about convenience. It's about completion. He doesn't just want to change your circumstances. He wants to transform you through them. He isn't simply answering your prayer. He's preparing your character to carry His promise. Sometimes what He's preparing for you is far greater than what you've been praying for. You ask for a straight path. He gives you a sacred journey. You ask for an answer. He gives you understanding. You want speed. He offers depth. Because God's goal is not to give you everything you want, but to teach you how to live in the fullness of what He gives. Think of a seed again, hidden beneath the ground, unseen, uncelebrated. It doesn't know what spring will look like, but it keeps growing anyway. Faith is much like that seed. It trusts that even in darkness, God is at work, and one day, what was buried in silence will break through the surface, strong, alive, and radiant with purpose. God is never in a hurry because He is never uncertain. His timing is perfect because His wisdom is infinite. When He asks you to wait, it's not to make you suffer, it's to make you ready. In waiting, He builds endurance. In silence, He teaches you to listen beyond words. In uncertainty, He shows you that His heart is more trustworthy than your circumstances. And one day, when the waiting ends and the answer comes, you'll see what He was doing all along. You'll understand why the road had to curve, why the silence had to last, why the doors stayed closed until that exact moment. You'll realize that the time He took was not delay, it was design. In that moment, tears will fall, not of sorrow, but of understanding. You'll whisper, Lord, now I see. You were never late. You were preparing me for what You had prepared for me. Because faith isn't just about believing in God's power. It's about trusting His timing. He knows how to align the right people, the right season, and the right opportunity so perfectly that when it all unfolds, you'll know it could have only been Him. So if you're in a waiting season, take heart. God is not distant. He is not silent. He is simply working in ways too intricate for you to see. And when His perfect timing arrives, you'll see that every pause had a purpose. Every delay held meaning, and every tear was watering the soil of something beautiful. Because in the end, God's timing isn't just right, it's perfect. Part 2. Because waiting builds our character. No one likes to wait. In our human nature, waiting always feels like losing. Losing time, losing opportunities, losing control. But in the eyes of God, waiting is never wasted. It is the classroom of the soul. He never asks us to wait without purpose. He asks us to wait so that He can shape us, refine us, and prepare us for what He has promised. Because there are things God wants to do for you, but first, He must do something in you. Waiting is where character is born in silence. Like gold refined by fire, the human heart is purified only through the heat of endurance. There is no shortcut to maturity, no miracle that can grow depth without the slow, hidden work of time. It is in those long stretches of silence, when nothing seems to move, that God engraves the deepest lessons, lessons no sermon could ever teach. Only His still hand can write upon the soul. Joseph understood this well. A young dreamer chosen by God, full of vision and promise. He was destined for greatness, yet before he reached the throne, he was betrayed, sold, forgotten, imprisoned. 13 long years, no miracles, no voices from heaven, just stone walls and unanswered questions. But it was in those 13 years that Joseph changed. He was no longer the boy who boasted of dreams, but a man who learned humility, patience, and grace. And when the time finally came, God didn't just lift Joseph into power. He raised up a man strong enough to carry the blessing without being crushed by it. Waiting doesn't change God's plan. It changes us so we can live within it. God will never give us a blessing that our hearts aren't yet ready to hold. He doesn't want to fill a vessel that's still cracked. He wants to heal it first. So He makes us wait, not to punish us, but to prepare us, not to delay us, but to deepen us. He is mending what is broken, teaching patience, shaping compassion, forming the kind of character that can sustain the promise. In the waiting, we learn to listen. When everything else is stripped away, when there's nothing left to cling to, we finally begin to hear His whisper. Not loud, not dramatic, but soft, like wind passing through the soul. We learn to trust what we can't see, to walk without a map, to smile through uncertainty. And in that sacred process, faith stops being theory and becomes breath itself. Someone once said, faith isn't believing God can, it's believing He will, even when He hasn't. That is the faith forged in waiting. When emotion fades, when prayers fall silent, when strength runs dry, that's when faith is born, pure and unshakable. It no longer depends on feelings or signs. It rests on one truth alone: God is still good. Waiting also teaches us surrender. We begin to let go of the things we thought we couldn't live without, dreams, timelines, even people, and discover that what we truly need is God Himself. When a door closes, we stop panicking, because we know that if God didn't open it, He has another way. When someone walks away, we stop resenting, because we know their chapter in our story has ended. When a dream falls apart, we stop despairing, because we know God never takes without intending to give something greater. And then, somewhere in the quiet, something shifts. Waiting changes us.
The impatient heart becomes gentle.
The fearful soul learns courage. The anxious mind learns peace. The person who once demanded answers now finds rest in mystery. The very season you thought would break you is the one that made you whole. Waiting becomes your teacher, silent, faithful, holy, showing you how to trust, how to endure, and how to love deeper than before. Waiting also teaches gratitude, because when what you've prayed for finally arrives, you'll no longer take it for granted. You'll treasure every detail, every moment, because you'll remember what it cost. The nights of tears, the years of faith, You'll lift your hands not just for what you received, but for who you became while waiting for it. God cares less about the destination and more about the transformation. He's not rushing to get you where you want to be. He's shaping you into who you need to become when you get there. A quick answer might make you happy for a day, but a heart transformed by patience will last for eternity. So if you find yourself in a season of waiting, don't assume you've been forgotten. And you may be standing in God's workshop, where He chisels, molds, and refines. He's not destroying you, He's sculpting you. Every disappointment, every delay, every tear, they are the careful strokes of the artist forming his masterpiece. He sees what you cannot see, and He will not stop until it is complete. One day you'll look back and thank Him for not answering too soon. You'll thank Him for the doors that closed, for the prayers that seemed ignored, because you'll realize those were the moments your soul was being trained. When you learn that faith isn't about holding on, it's about letting go. Waiting humbles us. It reminds us that we are not the center, that God's plans are far higher than our own. In the silence, He is pressing, stretching, softening our hearts, so we can feel what He feels. So we can empathize with others who are waiting too. Once you've walked through darkness, you'll know how to walk beside someone else in theirs. That's why God doesn't hurry. He's not just blessing you, He's preparing you to be a blessing. Some people come to know God through miracles. Others come to know Him through waiting. The latter know Him deeper. They meet Him not on mountaintops, but in valleys of stillness. They know Him not just as the giver, but as the companion, the one who sits with them in silence, who counts their tears, who breathes peace into their weary souls. And these are the ones who carry a quiet strength the world cannot understand, because they've learned, if you have God, you don't have to fear time. Waiting doesn't just change circumstances. It changes who we are. It teaches us that peace isn't found when everything goes our way, but when we finally believe that everything is in God's hands. And once we truly believe that, silence loses its power to scare us. We begin to see every moment of delay as a seed of promise being planted. Every tear becomes rain for the harvest. Every day we choose faith over frustration is a victory in heaven's eyes. So don't despise the waiting. It is not wasted time. It's holy ground where your soul is being rooted. And when the harvest comes, you won't just reap the answers to your prayers. You'll reap the fruit of patience, endurance, and faith that cannot be shaken. Waiting is never easy, but it is sacred, because every time you choose to trust instead of complain, to pray instead of panic, to hope instead of quit, you are becoming more like Christ. And perhaps that is the real purpose of every season of waiting, not simply to receive what you've asked for, but to become who God always intended you to be. Part 3. Because God is working in the unseen. There are days when you look up at the sky and see nothing but clouds. Your prayers rise, but they seem to disappear into the air. Every effort feels unanswered. Every whisper seems unheard. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet question forms, God, are you still there? In that heavy silence, it's easy to believe He has turned away. But the truth is, God's silence is never His absence. He is still working, just not in ways your eyes can yet see. When God is silent, it doesn't mean He has forgotten you. It means He is preparing something sacred beneath the surface. He works in stillness, like a master potter, shaping clay in the dim light, crafting something beautiful in secret. And when the time comes, He will lift the lid, and you will see that every moment of stillness was filled with His careful design. Every delay, every pause, every unanswered prayer was a thread of grace, woven into the tapestry of His perfect plan. Think of the story of Esther. Throughout the entire book, God's name is never mentioned, not even once, and yet His presence is everywhere. Every twist, every coincidence, every turn of fate carries His fingerprints. The absence of His name was never the absence of His hand. In the same way, maybe your story feels quiet, unseen, uneventful. But one day, when you look back, you'll realize that God was writing between the lines, using invisible ink that time itself would one day reveal. Sometimes God hides His hand, not because He is distant, but because He is protecting you. If you could see all that he is arranging, you might try to take control. If you knew what he was sparing you from, you might cling to what he is trying to remove. So he smiles and says softly, "Just trust me," because faith is not born in sight. It is born in surrender. It is learned not in the knowing, but in the not knowing. And in that darkness, your soul begins to see, not with eyes, but with trust. The unseen world of God has never stopped moving. Angels move at his command. People you haven't met yet are being prepared to walk into your story. Doors you think are closed are being knocked on from the other side. Conversations are being written. Opportunities being aligned. All perfectly timed to meet you where you will need them most. Heaven is not silent. It's simply working behind the scenes. And one day, when the curtain lifts, you'll see that every quiet season was full of motion. Divine, deliberate, loving motion. God works in the unseen. Just as life grows beneath the soil, a seed buried in darkness looks lifeless, forgotten. But deep below, roots are spreading. Walls are breaking. Life is forming. Nothing can be seen above the ground, yet everything is happening beneath it. So it is with you. Miracles are taking shape in the silence. You just haven't seen them bloom yet. True faith is not built in moments of clarity, but in the quiet where no answers come. You may not hear his voice, but he is speaking through a different language. The language of patience, of endurance, of unseen grace. Every silence carries a whisper. Don't be afraid, my child. I'm still here. We often assume God is only at work when we can see results. But he is working even when nothing appears to move. Stillness is not inactivity. It is preparation. Like the moment before a symphony begins, when the conductor lifts his hand and the entire room holds its breath. That is what divine silence is. Not the end, but the beginning. Not a void, but the sacred pause before the music of his glory fills the air. Maybe right now, you are in that sacred pause, that place of not yet. You see no progress, no sign, no change. But even there, God is moving. When you weep behind closed doors, he gathers your tears into rivers of restoration. When you feel you're walking alone, he walks beside you, quietly keeping your heart beating with hope. He has never left you, not for a single breath. There is a strange beauty in the way God works through what we cannot see. He doesn't need noise to prove his power. One whisper from his heart can calm a storm. One unseen command can shift the course of your destiny. So if all you hear today is silence, listen closely. That silence might just be the sound of his presence. One day, when the veil is lifted, you will look back and see how perfectly he orchestrated everything. You will understand why he made you wait, why he closed that door, why certain people left, and why the road was longer than you thought. You will see that every delay, every detour, every moment of quiet was his hand, forming you, teaching you, molding you into who you were meant to be. He was not only creating miracles around you, he was creating a miracle inside you, a heart that trusts, a soul that rests, and a faith that stands, even when it doesn't understand. So don't be afraid of his silence. Don't mistake his stillness for indifference. He works most powerfully when you see least clearly. The silence isn't empty. It's full of movement you can't yet perceive. Every passing moment holds the weight of heaven's preparation. And when that day comes, when light breaks through and the unseen becomes visible, you will realize he never left your side. He was there in every tear, every heartbeat, every breath. You will understand that what seemed like stillness was full of grace, and that every quiet night was alive with the rhythm of his love. And in that moment of understanding, you will whisper through tears of gratitude, "Lord, now I see. You were never silent. You were whispering through what I could not see." Part 4. Because delay is not denial. There are prayers that seem to rise and vanish into the silence. Dreams that have waited so long, they begin to feel forgotten. And sometimes, as time drifts by, your heart starts to wonder if heaven has gone quiet, if maybe God has changed his mind. You see others receive what they prayed for, while you're still standing at the doorway, waiting for something that hasn't come. In the ache of that waiting, you whisper, Lord, why haven't you answered me yet? But what your soul must learn is this. God's delay is never his denial. His not yet is not a punishment. It's a promise in process. God does not work by the clock of man. He measures time by purpose, not by minutes. When he says wait, it doesn't mean never. It means I'm still writing your story. Some prayers take time, not because they are wrong, but because you are still being shaped for the answer. God knows when your heart is deep enough to hold the blessing, when your spirit is strong enough not to be crushed by the weight of it. When God delays, he's not being distant, he's being deliberate. Every delay has meaning. Every silence has purpose. Sometimes he waits, so you can learn to walk beside him instead of running ahead. Sometimes he holds back the blessing until your patience has grown strong enough to carry it. And sometimes he's preparing everything around you, people, timing, circumstances, so that when his promise arrives, it won't just visit your life, it will stay. God's promises always exceed our expectations. We ask for a door, but he's building a house. We want a quick solution, but he's crafting a story. We long for something good, but he is working on something perfect, and perfection takes time. No rose blooms overnight. No faith matures without waiting. God isn't delaying, he's developing. In John 11, when Lazarus grew sick, Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus, "The one you love is ill." But instead of rushing to heal him, Jesus stayed where he was 2 more days. To human hearts, that delay looked cruel, but in heaven's eyes it was love. Because if Jesus had come sooner, Lazarus would have been healed. But by coming later, Lazarus was raised. Sometimes God doesn't give you what you ask for, because he's preparing something far greater than you ever dreamed. When God makes you wait, he's not withholding blessing, he's perfecting its timing. Like a jeweler who refuses to remove the gold from the fire before it's pure, God keeps you in the refining season until what's within you shines. Like a loving father, he doesn't give his child everything they demand, but everything they need. Sometimes the deepest expression of his love is not what he gives, but what he withholds for a while. Delay is the furnace of faith, because real faith doesn't just believe when the answer comes. It believes while waiting. It keeps walking, even when the path is foggy. It keeps praying when heaven feels quiet. It keeps trusting, not because it sees the outcome, but because it knows the character of the one who promised. Faith is not grown on the mountaintop of answered prayers, but in the valley of still waiting. Delay is also a mirror. It reveals the heart. It shows what we cling to, what we must release, what we truly love. Sometimes, God delays not to test your patience, but to purify your devotion, to show whether you love him for who he is, or only for what he gives. In the silence, he is transforming you into the very answer you've been praying for. If God answered too soon, pride might remain. If he waited too long, hope might fade. But he knows the perfect in-between, that sacred moment when patience has done its work, when humility has replaced hurry, and when your heart is ready to see the miracle not as a prize, but as grace. When God delays, he invites you to discover something more precious than the answer, himself. In the waiting, you find him in the ache, in the prayer, in the quiet tears. You realize that the miracle you need is not always the change of circumstance, but the transformation of the soul. Waiting becomes worship. Silence becomes sacred. Your heart learns to rest even when nothing has changed, because you've learned that peace is not found in outcomes, but in his presence. God is never late. He arrives at the exact moment he intends to, not a heartbeat sooner, not a second too late. But to understand that kind of timing, we must learn to trust in the dark. God doesn't owe us explanations. He asks for faith. And when the appointed time comes, we finally understand why he chose not yet over right now. Because right now might have comforted us, but not yet changed us. There will come a day when you'll look back and say with quiet gratitude, if God had answered me sooner, I wouldn't have been ready. If he had given me what I wanted, I would have missed what he truly meant for me. You'll see that every delay was mercy in disguise. That while you thought he was making you wait, he was actually making you whole. And when the promise finally arrives, when what you've prayed for becomes real, you'll know it wasn't just an answer. It was the fruit of your faith, a promise matured through silence, a blessing steeped in patience, and a miracle kissed by grace. So if you're waiting today, don't lose heart. Remember, delay is not denial. It's the sacred space between planting and harvest, between promise and fulfillment. God hasn't forgotten you. He's preparing you, shaping you, and aligning everything so that when the promise comes, you'll not only receive it, you'll be ready to carry it. Because one day, when the waiting is over, you'll see it clearly. Every moment of silence was a verse in the song of his timing. Every delay was a bridge to something better. And in that moment of revelation, you'll realize that God's timing was never late. It was always love. And you'll whisper, with tears of peace in your eyes, "Thank you, Lord, for making me wait. Because what you gave me was not just what I asked for, it was what I needed all along." Part 5. Because waiting strengthens our faith. Faith is not born in the comfort of light, but in the darkness of unanswered prayers. It grows quietly in the places where nothing seems to move, where you are left with only trust to hold on to. In the silence, when hope feels thin and reason runs out, faith begins to breathe. It doesn't grow because you see. It grows because you choose to believe even when you can't. It doesn't mature in miracles, but in the long, quiet seasons where everything looks still. Every waiting season is not wasted time. It is sacred ground where God tests, shapes, and strengthens the heart that chooses to stay. When every door closes, when every prayer seems to echo back unanswered, and when your heart grows weary, that is when faith stops being an idea. It becomes breath itself. True faith is not the emotion you feel when things go right. It is the decision to stand when the wind is against you. It is the whisper of yes in your soul when your voice has no strength left. Faith is not born from miracles. It is the miracle. It is what keeps your soul from breaking when life does. It is the flame that flickers but never goes out, even when the storm rages hardest. Waiting is the training ground of faith. Each unanswered day, each silent night, is a chisel in the hands of a loving God, carving away impatience, pride, fear, revealing something purer and stronger within you. God doesn't test you to break you. He tests you to build you, like a loving father teaching his child to walk. He doesn't always carry you. He lets you stumble so you can learn how to stand. And when you fall, he doesn't turn away. He waits with open hands, ready to lift you again. Every delay, every silence, every moment of stillness is his gentle lesson. Strength is not found in control, but in surrender. Faith is not the absence of fear. It's choosing to move forward, even while afraid. Abraham left everything he knew, not because he saw the destination, but because God said, "Go." Moses raised his staff over the sea, not because he knew it would part, but because he trusted the one who commanded him. David faced Goliath, not because he was stronger, but because he believed God was greater. The heroes of faith all shared this one truth. They didn't know the outcome, but they knew the one who promised. Waiting is where that kind of faith is born. When you can no longer rely on logic, on plans, on emotions, when all you have left is God, that's when faith becomes real. It's no longer theory, it's experience. No longer talk, it's trust. No longer knowledge, it's surrender. Strong faith isn't built on easy blessings, but on silent seasons. When God doesn't speak, you learn to hear him in the wind. When he doesn't appear, you learn to find him in the smallest details. A sliver of light, a kind word, a sunrise after a sleepless night. When he doesn't do what you expected, you learn to believe that his way is still better. And in that process, your faith stops being fragile like a flower. It grows deep roots like a tree, unshaken by storms. Sometimes, faith will make you cry. There will be nights when you pray until your voice fades, and heaven feels painfully still. There will be moments you want to quit, when you wonder if belief even matters anymore. But in those moments, when all human strength is gone, faith begins to draw breath from God himself. He becomes your strength in weakness, your light in the darkness, your hope in despair. True faith is not about holding on to God. It's realizing He has never let go of you. Waiting humbles faith. It reminds you that you cannot command time, force miracles, or dictate outcomes. In the quiet surrender, you learn the most powerful truth. Faith doesn't need control to survive. It only needs trust. The strongest faith isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet, steady, confident that God is working even when you can't see it. Waiting also makes faith tender. When you've wept through your own waiting, you learn how to comfort those who wait. When you've walked through darkness, you know how to light a candle for someone else still lost in theirs. Real faith doesn't just make you stand. It helps you lift others up. Those who have learned to trust through God's silence carry a softness that shines. They know that sometimes silence isn't empty. It's the place where God teaches you to love deeper, trust stronger, and hope longer. And then one day, you begin to realize that God doesn't just want you to believe He will do what you asked. He wants you to believe Him, even if He doesn't. Mature faith doesn't demand miracles. It recognizes that He Himself is the miracle. It doesn't depend on things going your way. It rests in knowing He's already in control. It doesn't need to see the future. It simply trusts that He's already there. When faith reaches that place, waiting no longer feels like a burden. It becomes a sanctuary for the soul. You stop fighting the pace of time. You stop rushing the process. You begin to find peace in the in-between, because you understand that every day without an answer is another day God is teaching you something better. Perseverance, peace, and a trust that cannot be shaken. And when the answer finally comes, when what you've prayed for unfolds before your eyes, you'll look back and realize that the waiting itself was the true gift, because it changed you. It made you into someone who could receive the blessing without being destroyed by it. Someone more grateful, more gentle, more alive in grace. Waiting makes faith stronger, not because it's easy, but because it's real. Every tear, every night of silence, every time you fell and got back up, those moments were the fire refining your faith, turning it into something unbreakable, eternal. And one day, you'll understand God didn't use waiting to punish you. He used it to prepare you. So if you're waiting now, don't lose hope. This is not wasted time. This is where God is building your faith, making you stronger, deeper, and closer to Him. Every day without an answer is His gentle whisper. Don't be afraid, you're growing. And when you look back, you'll see that you didn't just learn to trust His promises, you learned to trust His heart. Because in the end, faith isn't about reaching the miracle. It's about becoming like the one who promised it. Part 6. When waiting becomes faith. In the end, we realize that what God wanted to teach us through every season of waiting wasn't just patience. It was trust. Because when we learn to wait without complaining, to be still without doubting, to keep believing even when we can't see, that's when faith matures. Waiting is no longer an empty stretch of time. It becomes the sacred place where the soul is refined, where love is purified, trust is rooted deep, and hope is reborn. The seasons that felt meaningless were the very places where we met God most deeply. For He is not only present in our victories or miracles, He is there in the quiet, in the tears, in the whispered prayer that says, "Lord, I still believe you're here." And it's in those moments, raw, vulnerable, and silent, that faith becomes real. It's no longer something we talk about, but something we live. In the dark, in the questions, in the waiting, where heaven seems still. And then, one day, when we look back, we will smile through tears, because we'll finally see that God was never late. Every delay was preparation. Every silence was an invitation to listen closer. Every not yet was a tender hand shaping our hearts, so that when His promise arrived, we would be ready to hold it. We'll understand that the greatest miracle wasn't the answered prayer. It was the faith that survived the waiting. For if we only trust God when He gives us what we want, that's desire, not faith. But if we trust Him when He is silent, wait for Him when He seems far, love Him even when He says wait, then we've learned the truest form of faith. Real faith doesn't demand understanding. It simply rests in this truth, that God is good, even when we don't understand. Waiting, in the end, doesn't take time away from us. It gives time back to us. It gives us space to grow, to see more clearly, to love more deeply. It teaches us that miracles aren't only found at the end of the road, but in every step of trust along the way. Every tear, every sleepless night, every whispered, "I still believe," is a seed planted in the soil of grace. And when the harvest comes, when the answer finally arrives, we'll find that what we've gained is not just what we prayed for, but who we've become through it. We'll stand with hearts softer, humbler, and stronger, realizing that faith didn't just bring us to the miracle, it made us resemble the one who gave it. So if you're waiting right now, don't lose heart. God has not forgotten you. He is working quietly, intentionally, lovingly. Moment by moment, layer by layer, everything is moving according to His timing, not yours. And when He finally unveils what He's been preparing, you'll see that everything He did was perfect, on time, and filled with love. Waiting is no longer frightening when you know who you're waiting for. Because you're not just waiting for something, you're waiting for someone who never breaks His promises. And when you understand that, you'll see, waiting was never a burden. It was a blessing.